I carry my father's pocket knife in my left front pocket every morning when I put my jeans on. Been doing it since he died in 1968. That knife is 64 years old. The handle is cracked along one side. I filled the crack with a little pine tar one spring, years back, and the pine tar darkened over the decades until it just became part of what the knife is, part of what the thing is. My daddy Earl never said a word when he gave me that knife. I was 19. He'd been sick a long while by then. The black lung was taking him in pieces the way it took a good many men out of Pocahontas County. He didn't hand me that knife with a speech or a blessing or a single word. He left it on the kitchen table one morning and didn't take it back. I found it there when I came down to breakfast, and I put it in my pocket, and it has been in my left front pocket every morning since. I reckon that was how Earl Wilson said what he needed to say. I've thought about that knife a good deal these last few years, since Martha died, since I started sitting at this kitchen table with nothing but quiet and the things I never said out loud. What it meant to be a man, what the men who raised us believed it meant, and whether the code they called manhood was actually manhood at all, or something else wearing its clothes. I'm fixing to break that down for you tonight, but not yet. You cannot understand the wound without first understanding the inheritance. What got handed down in place of the thing we actually needed? A woman wrote to me last week. She said she had watched her husband of 47 years go quiet, little by little, year by year, until the quiet was so deep she could not tell anymore if there was something behind it or if the quiet had become the whole man. She said she loved him. She never knew if he loved her back, not in a way she could hold on to. 47 years of wondering. Sit a spell with me tonight. If you haven't subscribed yet, go on and do it, because what I'm about to say is the part nobody says out loud. And if you've got a quiet man in your life who cannot find the words, I want you to leave something in the comments when this is done. Say what you are carrying. Somebody else is carrying it too. The code I grew up inside of had a name, but nobody called it by that name. We just called it being a man. And what being a man meant in Wilson Hollow, in Pocahontas County, in every ridge and hollow county I ever knew, was this: you provide, you protect, you endure, you do not complain, you do not ask for help, you do not name what is hurting you, because naming it makes it real, and a real wound is a weakness, and weakness is something a man cannot afford. That is not strength, that is armor. There is a difference, and it matters. Strength is what you have when the armor comes off and you can still stand. What my generation was taught was not strength. What my generation was taught was armor. We spent our whole lives inside of it and called it character. And nobody ever told us there was a man inside the armor who needed something too. I see men who worked 40 years keeping the family warm, keeping the lights on, keeping the truck running, and who never once sat at the kitchen table and said to the woman across from them, "I am grateful for you. You are the reason I put my boots on in the morning. You are the reason any of this means a thing." I see them. I know them. I was one of them. I see men who watched their fathers die quiet and decided quiet was the right way to die, who watched their sons become strangers, a mile of distance growing 1 year at a time, and decided that was just the nature of men, who let their daughters carry too much, carry them, because the daughters were strong enough and it was easier than learning a new language. I see what that code produces at the far end of a long life. You get a man who cannot say his own son's name out loud for 13 years, who cannot say "I love you" to a woman he has loved and slept beside for 53 years, who sits at a kitchen table in the year after his wife dies and understands for the first time that the thing he thought was love was also silence, and the silence cost her something he cannot give back. That is not love. That is habit. There is a difference. Love names itself. Habit just stays and calls it enough. My daddy's generation called the silence self-reliance. My generation called it being tough. What it was, underneath both of those things, was a code that mistook the armor for the man inside it. We handed it to our sons the way you hand a man a tool. Here, this is what you use. But a tool that cannot do the job you need is not a tool. It is just weight. Being a man is not the weight. Being a man is having the courage to put it down. My daddy told me once, I was 16, maybe 17. We were sitting on the front porch on a summer evening, and our neighbor Walt Alderman had lost his barn to a fire that afternoon. Everything in it, the hay, the tools, the tractor, everything. We'd gone over with 3 or 4 other men and worked until dark, carrying what we could out of the wreck. Nobody said much. We came home, Daddy washed his hands at the pump, sat down on the porch, and he said to me, quiet, the way he said most things, a man does what needs doing. He don't talk about it. I believed him. I believed that was wisdom for 60 years. What I know now, at 76, is that my daddy was right about the work. He was wrong about what the work was for. The work is not its own justification. The work is love. The work is for her, for them. You are not doing it because you are strong enough to bear it alone. You are doing it because you love the people for whom you bear it. And if you cannot say that, then the people you love will spend their whole lives guessing at it. And some of them will guess wrong. I put up 6 cords of wood every fall of the year. I have done it since I was 22 years old, before Martha, and all the years with Martha, and after. Every October I go out to the woodshed and split what needs splitting and stack it 4 feet high, 8 feet long, and I count the cords, and I don't feel finished until I have 6. 6 cords will carry the cabin through any winter, even a hard one. I did this for 53 years, and I never said once to Martha, I do this because I love you. I want you to be warm. I will not have you cold in this house. She knew. I believe she knew. But there is a difference, and I want you to really hear this. There is a difference between a woman who is warm because her husband split the wood, and a woman who is warm because her husband split the wood and said, this is for you. I do this for you. One of those women knows what she has. One of those women spends 50 years guessing at it. Martha guessed right. I believe she never truly doubted the love, but she would have liked to hear it, coming out of my mouth with her name in it one time. And I didn't say it, not in 53 years of mornings. I'll get to why men stop being men. I aim to. But you need to understand the cord of wood first. The labor that stands in for the word. The love that can keep a body warm and still leave a person cold where it matters most. I knew a man named Henry. He lived about a quarter mile up the road from me in a house he built himself in 1962. Henry had 4 chairs at his kitchen table. He bought that table when his youngest was born in '69 because the old one wasn't big enough for the family he intended to keep. He raised 3 sons at that table, good sons. His oldest was a contractor in Elkins. The middle one managed a hardware store in Lewisburg. The youngest went down to Charleston and made something of himself in insurance. Henry was 71 when he died. He had been eating breakfast alone at that 4-chair table for 9 years by then, since his wife Norma passed in the spring of 2012. His sons called him. 2 of the 3 came for Thanksgiving most years. They fixed what needed fixing around the house. They were not bad sons. What they were was boys who had learned by watching their father that men do not say what they feel. So they called, they came, they fixed things, they left. And Henry sat back down at the 4-chair table with his coffee and the 3 empty chairs. And he didn't know how to tell them what he needed. What he needed was for somebody to stay, not to fix anything, just to stay. He went quiet to his grave. Those 3 sons of his are out there right now teaching their own boys the same code. That is not Henry's fault. That is the inheritance, moving forward until somebody stops it. I knew a man named Wendell. He taught English at the school in Marlinton for 32 years. Could quote you Whitman and Frost from memory. Poems about grief and longing and the weight a person carries their whole life without learning to set down. He explained those poems to children for 3 decades. He knew what they were about. He knew that the naming is the point, that you can carry a grief in silence your whole life. And once you find the word for it, the grief doesn't get smaller, but it gets lighter. And without the word, you just carry it heavier every year. His wife Gladys sat in the next room for 34 years. He could not say to her what the poems already knew. She died 8 years ago in the spring, and he had not found his way to the words yet. That is not a villainous thing. That is a quiet man who ran out of time. I want to tell you about Hollis Cobb. He was my hunting partner for 40 years. We hunted these ridges together every November from the time we were both 22 until he died at 68. We sat in the same blinds before first light. We ate cold biscuits in the dark. We drove home on November evenings with the windows fogged and the smell of wood smoke and cold air on us. Quiet the way men are quiet after a day of doing the thing they know how to do. Not once in 40 Novembers did I say to Hollis, "You are my oldest friend in this world, and I am grateful for you." I knew it. He knew it. The thing was there between us, clear as anything. But the code says you don't name what is between men, so we didn't. He died on a Wednesday in November of 2004. Heart attack. I drove to the funeral and sat in the back pew and looked at that casket, and I thought about every November morning, and every time I could have said the thing and didn't. Frank Mullins was sitting next to me. We didn't talk. That is what we do. You don't even say it at the end. That one has got no redemption at the close of it. Hollis is buried. What went unsaid between us went into the ground with him. That is just what it is. Now, here is the word for what it is. I didn't have this word for 60 years. The word is silence. Not quiet, silence. Quiet is what you choose. Silence is what gets chose for you, and you go along with it, because the men before you went along with it, and their men before them. The whole inheritance is silence, and that is why men stop being men. Not because they stopped working, not because they stopped providing, but because they kept the armor on until the man inside it disappeared. Because the cord of wood was full, and the lights were on, and the bills were paid, and that was supposed to be enough. It is not enough. Now I want to be the confession here, not just the witness. I passed the same silence to my son Daniel, not by teaching it to him on purpose. I passed it by living it in front of him for 40 years. Daniel calls me on the first Sunday of every month at 4 in the afternoon. He lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. He is 56 years old. He calls for about 23 minutes. We talk about the weather. We talk about the creek running high or low. We talk about whether I need anything from town. And then we say goodbye. What we do not talk about is the thing underneath all of it. I know what that thing is. He knows what it is. And every first Sunday, after I set the receiver down, I still have the wall phone Martha picked out in 1984, right there on the kitchen wall by the window. I sit there a minute, and I know exactly what I gave him. Not by cruelty, by habit, by carrying the code without questioning it until the course became plain. And by then Daniel was already grown and already quiet in the same way. That is the inheritance in motion. I am not only the man who received it, I am the man who passed it forward. My daddy Earl was not a cold man. He was not a man without love. He was not a man who did not feel. He was a man who had been handed a code by his own father before him, who had been handed it from his father before that, all the way back farther than any of us can name. He carried it without knowing it was a choice. He thought it was just what men were. He was a fellow captive, same as me, same as Henry, same as Wendell, same as Hollis. The code is not Earl Wilson. The code is older than Earl Wilson. The only question that matters is whether it outlasts us, or whether somebody finally says it out loud and hands something different to their sons. I want to mention something before I let you go tonight. I almost don't want to. Ruth Ann would be mad at me if I didn't say it. About a year after Martha passed, I started writing letters. Not on a computer, by hand, at this kitchen table. Letters to her. Letters to my boy Caleb. Letters to my daddy Earl, who died of black lung in 1968, before I ever told him what he meant to me. Letters to my brother Curtis, who came home from Vietnam in '69 in a flag-covered coffin at 24 years old. Letters I should have given when there was still somebody to give them to. I called it the things we don't say. Letters I should have given when there was still somebody to give them to. I wasn't going to show them to anybody. Then my daughter Ruth Ann brought me supper one Wednesday evening, and she saw the box on the table. And before I could stop her, she sat on the back porch and read 3 of them. She was out there about 20 minutes. Then she came back inside and she said, "Daddy, you gotta let other people see these. There's mamas out there. There's widows out there. They need to read these." I said no for about 3 months. She kept asking. She has her mother's stubbornness, which is a considerable thing. Eventually, I said yes. 3 women wrote to me that I want to tell you about. There is Eunice. She is 78 years old from Tennessee. She read an early copy and sat down that same evening with her husband of 51 years and said things to him she had never said out loud before. He cried like a child, she said. Then they sat on the porch and watched the dark come in. There is Mabel, 81, up in Kentucky. Lost her husband 9 years back. After she read the book, she wrote her own letters to him, took them to his grave one Sunday morning, and read them out loud. Said it was the first time she had cried in 7 years. And there is Pearl, 80 years old, in Pennsylvania. She lost a son to addiction at 29 and had not been able to say his name out loud for 11 years. After she read the letter I wrote to my boy Caleb, she stood at her kitchen sink and said her son's name. Said it 3 times. Then she made his favorite dinner for the first time since he passed. My son Daniel called me from Charlotte this past week. Said he didn't think I should have these letters out there. Said it was family business. That his mother wouldn't have wanted strangers reading them. He might be right. I might take them down. I don't know. I'm still thinking on it. The link is in the pinned comment under this video. It's there if you need it. That's all I'll say about it. Anyway, where was I? Right. I was telling you about that cord of wood. A man can split 6 cords every October for 50 years and still leave the people he loves cold on the inside. The cord keeps them warm in the body. The word keeps them warm in the soul. I know the difference now. I knew the chord. I did not know the word, not until it was too late to give it to the people who needed it most from me. The next time Daniel calls on the first Sunday, when we have talked about the weather and the creek, I aim to tell him that the cord of wood was always for him and his sister. That it was love I didn't know how to say, and so I said it with the splitting maul and the stacking of cords in October. I don't know if it will land right, but Martha told me, in the last word she ever said to me, "Don't you stop, Tom. Don't you dare stop." I believe she meant the saying of the things. Like I said earlier, those letters are in the pinned comment if you need them. If you're listening to me tonight, friend, if you are a man who has been keeping the wood box full and the lights on and thinking that ought to be enough, or if you are a woman who has spent decades warming herself by a fire a quiet man built and never quite knowing if the warmth was love or just labor, I want you to hear this. The cord of wood is not enough by itself. The cord of wood and the word together, that is what it was supposed to mean. That is what it means to be a man. And it is not too late, not for most of you. You still have time I used up without knowing what I was spending. The graveyard behind Spruce Creek Baptist has got 4 people in it I didn't say it to when I had the chance. I carry my daddy's knife every morning in my left front pocket. I know what he left on the table and what he left unsaid. I aim to do better by the ones I have got left. I am a late man, friend. Don't you be one too.